If your sciatica pain keeps coming back, even after painkillers, then I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say, because this is where most people get misled. The problem is not just the pain. The problem is what's causing the pain to keep returning. And if you don't understand this part, you can take ibuprofen again and again and again, and still wake up the next morning with that same pulling, burning, electric pain running down your leg. Now, I've seen this pattern too many times. Someone starts with mild discomfort. They take something for it. It works, temporarily. So they take it again the next day, then again the next week, until one day they realize two things. The pain is still there, and now their stomach is starting to complain too. That's what I call the pill bottle cycle. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Painkillers are very good at turning the volume down, but they don't always fix what's keeping the volume on in the first place. Now listen carefully to this next part, because this is where things start to change. Inside your body, when sciatica flares up, there is usually one major thing happening. Inflammation is building up around that nerve. Think of it like this. Imagine your sciatic nerve is a cable running through a narrow space. Now imagine that space slowly becoming swollen, irritated, tight. That cable doesn't have room anymore, so every time you move, you feel it. Sometimes as a dull ache, sometimes as a sharp pull, sometimes like an electric shock shooting all the way down your leg. Now here's the part nobody tells you. There are natural compounds that can influence that inflammatory process. Not in a miracle cure way, but in a real biological, measurable way. And some of them are sitting in your kitchen right now. Today, I'm going to show you 3 of them. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how they actually work inside your body. So you're not just trying random remedies. You understand what you're doing. Now, the first one. Most people have heard about it, but almost everyone is using it incorrectly. And that's why they say, it didn't work for me. Let's talk about turmeric. You've seen it. Bright yellow spice. Very common. But the reason turmeric matters is because of a compound inside it called curcumin. Now, I want you to follow me closely here, but I'll keep it simple. Inside your body, there is something called an inflammatory pathway. And one of the key switches in that pathway is something called the COX-2 enzyme. You don't need to remember the name. Just remember this. When this switch is turned on, inflammation increases. And when inflammation increases, that nerve becomes more sensitive, more irritated, more reactive. Now here's where it gets interesting. Medications like ibuprofen work by targeting that same switch. They try to block it, which is why you feel relief. But here's what most people don't realize. Curcumin, the active part of turmeric, has been shown to interact with that same pathway. Not identical, not as fast, but working in the same direction. Which means instead of just numbing pain, you may be helping your body calm the source of the irritation itself. Now, before you get excited, let me interrupt you for a second, because this is where most people completely mess it up. And if you don't fix this part, everything I just said becomes useless. If you are taking turmeric without black pepper, you are wasting your time. And I'm saying that very directly on purpose, because your body cannot absorb curcumin properly on its own. It passes through you without doing much. Black pepper contains something called piperine, and that one small addition can increase absorption dramatically. So now, instead of a little effect, you actually get something meaningful. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, tonight. Warm a cup of water or milk. Add turmeric. Add just a pinch of black pepper, and take it consistently. Not once. Consistency is where results come from. Now, before I move to the second one, let me ask you something, and I want you to actually answer this, because it tells me a lot about what's going on in your body. Where does your pain travel? Does it stay around your lower back or hip? Or does it shoot all the way down your leg, maybe even into your calf or your toes? Type it in the comments, because that pain path tells us how irritated that nerve might be. And I also want you to be honest with me on this one. On a scale of 1 to 5, how frustrated are you with the answers you've been given so far? 1 means you feel like you have a clear plan. 5 means you feel like you've just been going in circles, trying things that don't last. Type your number. I read these, and it helps me understand what you actually need, not what people assume you need. Now let's move to the second one. And this one works very differently, because instead of blocking something, it helps your body move things out of the way. And this is something many people completely overlook. I'm talking about ginger. Now, most people think ginger is just for digestion, or maybe for tea when you're feeling cold. But inside ginger, there are compounds like gingerol that can help support circulation. And this matters more than you think, because when inflammation builds up, it doesn't just sit quietly. It creates a kind of congestion, a buildup, almost like traffic on a narrow road. And around your sciatic nerve, that traffic is made up of inflammatory chemicals that keep irritating the nerve again and again and again. Now imagine turning on a slow, steady flow. That helps move that congestion out and brings in fresh oxygen and nutrients. That's how I want you to think about ginger, like an internal heating system. Not aggressive, not instant, but gradually improving the environment around that nerve. Now here's something most people don't realize. The effect of ginger is not just about what you take, it's about when you take it. Now this is the part most people don't expect. And honestly, it's the reason many people feel like nothing is working. Because even if you calm inflammation, even if you improve circulation, even if you support the nerve, there is one situation where the pain can still continue. And that is when something is physically pressing on the nerve. Not chemically, not nutritionally, physically. Now let me slow this down and explain it clearly. Your sciatic nerve doesn't just sit in open space. It travels through tight areas, between muscles, around joints, through narrow pathways. And if one of those surrounding structures becomes tight, swollen, or overactive, it can start to compress that nerve. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how much turmeric you take. It doesn't matter how much ginger you drink. You'll feel some relief, but the pain keeps coming back because the root pressure is still there. Now here's the part that surprises most people. When they think of sciatica, they immediately think of the spine, a slipped disc, something in the lower back. And yes, that can happen. But in a large number of cases, the real problem is not coming from the spine at all. It's coming from a small muscle deep in the hip, a muscle that most people have never heard of. But once you understand it, everything starts to make sense. This muscle sits underneath the larger muscles in your hip, close to where the sciatic nerve passes. And when it becomes tight, it can act like a clamp. Not aggressively, not suddenly, but gradually. It tightens, it shortens, and it begins to press against that nerve. Now think about your daily habits. Sitting for long periods, driving, minimal movement. All of these can slowly contribute to that muscle becoming tighter over time. And because it's deep, you don't always feel it directly. What you feel is the nerve reacting. Pain down the leg, tension in the glute, discomfort when you stand up after sitting. Now here's the pattern I see over and over again. Someone focuses only on the pain. They try medications. They try supplements. They try random stretches they found online. But nothing seems to fix it. Because they are treating the symptom, not addressing the source of the pressure. So let me connect everything for you now, very clearly. Because this is where you move from confusion to understanding. If your sciatica is driven mainly by inflammation, then yes, foods like turmeric and ginger can help support that process. If your nerve is becoming more sensitive over time, then yes, omega-3s can help support the structure and stability. But if there is a muscle quietly compressing that nerve, then until that pressure is relieved, you'll keep feeling like something is missing. Now I'm going to give you a simple way to test this, and I want you to actually try it. Tonight, or the next time you notice your pain, pay attention to this. When you sit for a while and then stand up, does the pain feel worse for a few moments before it settles? Or when you press deep into your glute area, do you feel a kind of referral of discomfort down your leg? If yes, that's a strong sign that something in that hip region may be contributing to the pressure. Now don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging here, because in my next video, I'm going to show you exactly what that muscle is, where it sits, and most importantly, a simple, safe way to begin releasing it at home. Nothing complicated, nothing aggressive, just a targeted approach that actually makes sense. Because once you relieve that pressure, everything else we talked about today starts working better. Now before we close, let me bring this back to something practical for you, because information without action doesn't change anything. Here's what I want you to do starting today. Pick one of the 3 foods we talked about. Just one. Don't overwhelm yourself. Maybe you start with turmeric, but you use it correctly with black pepper. Maybe you start with ginger, and you take it in the evening consistently. Or maybe you focus on omega-3s and begin adding fatty fish into your meals regularly. Just start, because small, consistent actions are what build real change over time. And I want to hear from you. Which one are you starting with? Type it below. Team turmeric, Team ginger, or Team omega-3. And if your pain has a specific pattern, tell me that too, because I read those comments, and it helps me guide you better. And one last thing, if this video helped you understand your body in a way that finally makes sense, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might be quietly dealing with this every day, because a lot of people are. They just don't talk about it. I'll see you in the next video, where we go deeper into that hidden hip muscle and how to finally take the pressure off that nerve. Because once you remove the pinch, you're no longer just chasing the pain, you're actually solving it.